Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, Jason. Cool. So welcome to today's demo. Who has something they would like to demo?
I do. Are we jumping right into it, or is there anything else we're going to discuss?
Go for it, I think.
Okay,
very
cool.
happy to see what you got.
I'm basically going to repeat what I did this morning, though I have a little bit more information, and I also emailed, or you probably saw that I emailed Google about this problem as well. So this is, for a little bit of background, there's an issue currently with our WebSockets deployment. We removed the Nginx ingress, so we're connecting right to the service endpoint, and we're seeing problems when pods are cycled. We're seeing errors, and this is very reminiscent of an earlier problem, and this is something that Jason was also helping us out with, where we saw an issue with the Nginx ingress where connections were being held open, and we were seeing errors as pods were cycled. And we tweaked some parameters in the Nginx ingress, and that problem went away. We then, after that, we were seeing problems with when Nginx controller pods were being cycled. So what we did is we threw a lot of resources at the Nginx ingress so that the pods never get cycled. What we've done since then is that instead of running a GCP internal LB in front of Nginx, now we've taken out Nginx and we're running a GCP internal LB right in front of our nodes that are servicing WebSockets. So in front of our Rails nodes. What I'm going to show is what happens when a pod is removed from the list of endpoints. Share my screen and hopefully this works. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Shoot. Hold on a second. Okay, so what's going on here? I'm sending requests to the service endpoint directly. So
Now
this
we can't
is,
see.
Sorry, we can't see this. Yeah.
mother F. Oh,
I don't know what happened there, but
this happened this morning. Like, can you see it now?
No.
I'm gonna
trying to show it something is just blank.
This is happening to me a lot on Zoom at the moment as well. It's really great on a customer call on Tuesday where I had to log off and log on 3 times.
Does it mean don't update?
I've gone through 2 updates and it's still, at least, no, 1 or 2 updates and it's still happening for me.
Oh, interesting. Yes, Jarv, works. But now we don't hear you.
There we go. Okay, we are hitting this endpoint here. This is the service endpoint for the GitLab Web Service WebSockets service. This is a Google load balancer. internal load balancer. And I'm hitting just like a README in a project. This is on pre-prod. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see like the requests coming in. And in the upper right-hand corner, you can see I have K9s running. So the pod is XGHTK, and you can see in the lower right-hand corner, these are the requests going to XGHTK. I can get the endpoints, which shows that for this node, we have XGHTK is the endpoint for web service WebSocket. So everything looks good. We're able to talk to the WebSocket service. This isn't a WebSockets connection, but it doesn't matter because I can demonstrate this by doing just regular HTTP requests. I'm going to edit the service, I think. Hold on.
I don't know if this
Screen
is
share
visible
seems to
for
have
everyone else, but
frozen.
the screen share looks paused.
Really? How about for everyone?
This is exactly what happens to me.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, the logs are not moving. Yeah, right.
This is really
Sorry.
annoying.
It is very annoying. I mean, I'm close to moving over to a different screen sharing option, Loom or something, because it's terrible.
But this was working fine up until I upgraded OS X, I think, or something. Maybe I upgraded
Yeah,
Zoom.
it's definitely been since I upgraded OS X.
Could you check your Zoom version? I'm just curious.
Sure. It is 5310927.
Oh, that's a very old one.
Yours is ancient. Mine's
Yeah,
549.
you should consider upgrading.
Okay.
It may not help though, if
may
my
not
experience
help,
is anything
but-
to go by.
At least it's not ancient.
Yeah. This really sucks because I don't know. I'll try to leave and come back.
It's all reminding me a bit of Skype.
That's just cruel. I remember those days. You never had any credit. That was always my problem. There we go.
Yeah.
How about now? Are things
Yeah, we
moving?
can see.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
back.
we're seeing it.
For now, right? Try not to touch too many things here. So I'm going to make a change that's going to result in like a new pod coming up. Can you see that a new pod is being brought
Yes.
up? Oh, okay. Maybe if I don't touch anything, it'll keep working. So this takes a little bit of time, but what we hope to see is that traffic will shift from this XGHTK pod to the new one ZTWWQ pod, and we won't have any 500s, but that's not going to happen.
And what boot up time are we talking about these days?
About a minute or two.
Oof. Okay.
So please, like if you can still.
2 seems really long. Why?
I think it stopped Jarv again. I don't see anything moving.
Wow.
Is it a matter of focus?
Yeah, it might be. I think I'm gonna try to keep the same focus.
This seems like Zoom plus Big Sur.
Yeah, probably.
It's funny how it works for a while and then stops working. That's the odd bit.
I'm just gonna unmute.
Unmute.
All right. Are things moving? I'm not
Yes,
gonna
moving, and we hear you. Yeah.
All right. I'm not. I would like to show you more, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to touch it. Basically, if you were to look at if you were to do kubectl get endpoints, you would see that both endpoints are listed. This new one isn't healthy yet, but it will be soon as it comes up. And hopefully you still see we're servicing requests. You see some of like the new pod logs are, we're starting to see some activity from it. So first thing to notice here, hopefully still moving, XGHTK isn't terminating, but look at that, it's still receiving traffic. That's strange.
Okay, so My immediate questions on this are, do we have the appropriate drain timeouts configured and in use?
Drain time? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Like in what context? You mean like the grace period or?
Yes. There's a termination grace
yeah.
period, which is the time between sig term and sig kill.
Yeah, but that doesn't come into play here because as soon as the termination starts, right, the queue proxy, it should stop traffic. Now, right now we have 0 out of 2 pods, 0 out of 2 containers ready, and we're still receiving traffic. Now we're still processing requests because we're in this period of time where Puma, this is the blackout window but there's no reason, even with like the termination grace period, there's no reason why you should be receiving requests with 0 out of 2 pods ready and in the terminating state. And we're still seeing requests. This is just wrong, right?
So let's understand what takes a pod out of a service, because there seems to be this view that if it's terminating, it should just be removed.
It's not in the list of endpoints. If you look at the endpoints, it's not in the list. So it's out of service. I'm gonna do that, and hopefully we can still see. If you can see my screen, you'll see
No, it
that
looks
ZT.
stuck.
Yeah. The
Oh
moment
my
you touched
God.
it. Okay. So
But just trust me that we're still receiving requests, and in the list of endpoints, ZTWWQ, which is the new pod, is there. XGHTK is not in the list of endpoints.
all right. So what we ended up tweaking, as you mentioned earlier in Nginx, had to do with the number of connections that are actually piped over a given open socket, basically reuse socket. HA proxy has a connection in the service that's going potentially hitting the endpoint.
I am not
Why?
using HA proxy at all. I am doing directly to the service endpoint. I am not touching HA proxy is not being like used at all here.
Okay, so you're going directly to the service proxy.
Yes.
Okay, so in the end, I need to know exactly how this is operational and if it's actually forming new TCP connections every time. Because if it's at all reusing the socket, it's going to hold the socket open, and the TCP layer within the kernel on the node won't stop using that existing connection to the pod. Something has to tell it to stop.
That's possible. Like I can look at this load generator thing to see if there's a new connection every time, but like, I don't know, it still seems kind of iffy to me, right?
Shouldn't the Google Load Balancer be removing this pod?
He's not using the Google Load Balancer.
Yeah, so the Google Load Balancer has attached to it. I'm gonna stop my screen share again. I'll be right back. Unmute, share screen. So the GCP TCP Load Balancer has the nodes attached to it. So those nodes are always healthy. And the requests are going to one of the nodes, which then, then you're dealing with like the queue, you're dealing with queue proxy, right? And then that gets directed to whatever pod is healthy. Right now, if you see my screen, like we have this pod that's still in the terminating state and still receiving traffic. And this has been like over a minute now. Finally, now that the pod has been removed completely, now it's switched over to the new pod.
Right, and I have no doubt that's because the termination grace period came along and went, what are you still doing here, bunk?
Yeah. So I don't know. I sent an email to Google, and I'll be interested to see what they come back with about this. I don't know. I guess it's possible that we have connection reuse, but for over 2 minutes, like, is that really a possibility?
Mm-hmm. As we've recently seen, what happens when you have a long-standing connection that doesn't quite match up?
Well,
now that was specifically around idle timeouts regarding mailroom. However, the principles within the networking stack remain the same. If you have something that's currently directing traffic and that pipe is held open, it is explicitly not terminated unless told to do so. Kubeproxy does not terminate with haste. So
Okay,
really,
well,
we have to figure out what's going on that is being held open, and effectively you have a sticky connection through the IP stack from node A to pod Z, because that's what's happening, is that traffic is still being routed there, and there's not something that says, get off of me, go away, and it's just keep getting routed there. If we have a connection reuse and we're just issuing many, many requests, then we're going to continue to see traffic going over that connection because it's held open.
well, this will be easy enough to validate because I can switch from using this load generator to just sending curl in a loop. I'm only sending like one request a second. So we can do that. Yeah, I mean, I can do that now. I just hate the screen sharing stuff because now, like, as soon as I click anywhere, I'm probably lost my screen share.
Yeah.
It's kind of annoying.
Maybe share the whole desktop.
Yeah, I can try that. Are things moving?
Maybe we need to. No, nothing. No, we don't see anything. Maybe we should build our own.
Yeah.
We haven't got time for that.
Switch to Linux where this doesn't happen.
I mean, we depend on it, so.
I think the infrastructure team should do it.
Only I was running Linux. That must be the problem.
No,
No, don't.
Linux.
No, it's not.
I regret upgrading at this moment.
I don't have any problems with my Zoom, so I don't know what's going on. I guess it also depends on which Linux you're using.
The problem I suffer is that the UI will flicker quite often. It's kind of annoying.
The UI flickers for you? Oh, wow. That's weird. Yeah, this is definitely a very annoying effect of Big Sur in combination with Zoom right now, because staring at a big gray box is fun. At least when the camera breaks on macOS, you get a black box that you know that they're trying to send you something.
Are there any other things we want to discuss or demo in this call today, just so we can manage time?
I don't have anything.
Do you need any help on the external dependency issue?
Jarvan and I had a conversation about that yesterday. We're going to try to iterate on the solution. So I'm going to try to, I didn't get a chance to do this yesterday due to other things, but I'm going to try to work on a first iteration of that today. And then I may wait until an improvement comes into a GitLab to make it more better in the future. But we'll see how that goes over the course of time. Hopefully I should be able to complete that within a day, just a matter of getting that reviewed. If all goes well.
Cool. Sounds good.
if anything, I could use help on. Jason, you've seen me putting in thousands of merge requests into the home chart. They don't have a priority label. Some of them are labeled as production requests because we use those home charts. It'd be great if we could just get those reviewed so that we could, at some point when we get a chance, upgrade our own home chart that we're consuming. That way I could unblock Andrew for rolling some SLA, SLI saturation metrics for the HPAs, etc. At this point, I think I've got all the charts in that we control. I think the one question remains is whether or not we want to do the Nginx chart, because I think that requires a lot of touching because we forked it. The others that we inherit, like Postgres and Redis and Grafana, I think based on the conversation that you and I had very quickly yesterday, that we'll probably not touch those, which I think is fine. I need to note that on the issue just so that we have that documented though, and I have not done that. So I'll make sure I'll do that after this call.
Right. The items that we have not forked therefore do not control the source of. We can propose MRs upstream, but they're adding labels is unfortunately not sufficient to fork. So sorry, Andrew, you don't use those pods in production anyways. So at least that kind of helps. We can get started on that road, but not just yet. As to the large number of MRs, yes, we have seen them. We know that they're there. We're trying to get through all of the reviews. As a maintainer, I can tell you I've been swamped because you're not the only one submitting a bunch of MRs. So I do apologize that we're not moving faster on those. I'm trying to get to that on top of other duties that I have going on.
It's all good. I'm just providing a status update as to where I am.
Okay, so I think we've confirmed then, at least like from what I see, doing a curl in a loop looks like, I'm not sure if you can see my screen or not, but it looks like that does flip over immediately. So it sounds like to me then the errors that we're seeing on WebSockets probably are like held open connections, and we just don't handle that gracefully.
Okay, then by nature, the way WebSockets actually function, they are held open connections. So what we may need to look into is how to tell the pod during its blackout window to start issuing responses to the client that say reconnect. So we may actually have something that we need to do to enhance the application to say, hey, the one I'm connected to is shutting down, reconnect so that I get a new one.
Is there something that we could leverage inside of, say, AJ proxy that could try to recognize that a pod is, it's not, there's no way to do that. AJ proxy has no information about pod
No,
state.
I think like we're gonna have to, like Jason was saying, we'll have to signal to the client to reconnect.
Yeah.
I just on that point, I mean, having spent like 8 years working on WebSockets, but I don't know Action Cable, but I very much doubt that they haven't built Action Cable with that in mind. Like you get a signal in JavaScript that the connection's gone. And if your HA proxy and your intermediate proxies are all set up fine, the browser will get an event that says the connection's down. And like every implementation that I've seen of this will immediately try reconnect. And so there's no need to signal to the client to start trying again. You know, in the time frame that you do that, it might actually connect back to the same one. So the simplest thing to do is just to retry at that moment.
Disagree.
I don't think. Yeah.
You're 100% correct about the client side. My concern isn't the client side. My concern is that the server side needs to say, go away. While we're in the grace period of termination, while we're in the blackout seconds for the Rails application, we need to be telling active connections, stop it, go away, so that they know to reconnect. Once the stop action has occurred, and we're into that window after SIGTERM has been issued, that's when we should start saying, I'm going to finish your requests, but you need to go away. That's what the server needs to say that. because while the client is still connected and neither party has dropped the TCP socket, it's being held open by the kernel on the endpoint. We actually have to cause that to terminate. If we do it with some configuration of kubeproxy, we're affecting everything. We do not want to do this.
So
if we do
when
this in the application, we can literally just say, look, this is in the process of shutting down, go away. Once the SIG term has been issued and the pod has been said, I want to terminate, that drain timeout should be any open connections that are already placed to be answered. It should be removed from the service, which is what John has noted earlier, is it gets taken out of the service, but it still has connections going to it because they're in a held open socket.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the drain time on a WebSockets connection is basically 0 or close to 0, like a few seconds, and you just drop everyone and shut the process down. You never wait for people to disconnect. You know, because even if you told the client to disconnect, you know, a good percentage of your clients are going to be malfunctioning or going through a tunnel at that exact moment, and they're not going to do what you tell them to do, and you shouldn't trust them to do that anyway. So the best thing to do is just, you know, you don't need a drain, you know, and especially with Action Cable, because Action Cable is broadcast. It doesn't have like individual queues for individual clients. Basically, everyone gets everything or they don't. And so you can just shut the process down and those clients will reconnect.
And Andrew,
I'd be brutal about it.
Andrew, there's another element here that you may not have had in other implementations, which is having Workhorse in between, where these connections are proxied through Workhorse. So is that why we're seeing a bit of ugliness in our error rates? Basically, like, you know, Rails dies before Workhorse, and then Workhorse gets like a 503 service unavailable, returns a 503 service unavailable because like Rails just goes away.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good thing that would be a very good thing to test. Like we should have some sort of integration test that that makes sure that Workhorse is handling that correctly. But
yeah,
you know, certainly Nginx and other, you know, front side proxies have, or reverse proxies at least, manage that perfectly fine. So if they can do it, then Workhorse can do it too.
yeah. I mean, I guess like. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the next step should be then. Should we maybe like try to do some control tests to see what happens when these WebSockets get like, you know, when these connections drop with the open WebSocket?
Yeah, I mean,
connection?
what we could do is with like on GDK or something like that, or just locally running processes, just you know, set up open a WebSocket connection just with the client to the back end, and then to Action Cable, and then do a SIG term on Puma and see. I mean, I would imagine that Workhorse would just drop it. Like that's, you know, there's not that many things that it can do.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to interject here. The easiest way is probably use Docker Compose out of the CNG repository, stand it up, and then just forcibly terminate the Puma pod or Puma container. You'd be able to test this very easily. The other thing I want to call out is be aware. The reason I say we need the application to know to terminate Action Cable is because in our deployments, we have separation between API web and WebSockets. In 90% of the world, that's not the case. There is 1, 2, or 5 at most. We need to be aware of that fact. So while the answer can be just terminate the thing, anybody who's not operating in that individualized process behavior is going to be heavily affected by that choice. So when I say we need to tell the application, I'm saying during the blackout window, we need to identify that this is an active connection that is from Action Cable, shut it off, and then finish answering anything else.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I hadn't considered that. From a charts point of view, do you think there's any appetite for making that by default a separate workload? Because there are other reasons why, like not having your WebSockets coming into your main web application is a very good idea. or do you think that people aren't gonna? It's just too much extra complexity.
It's not that we can't separate it. It's a matter of resource versus scale, right?
Yeah.
At our scale, it makes hundreds of percentage to do it the right way and the way we're doing it.
Yeah.
In somebody who's 1,000 or even 2,000, it's like
Yeah.
we're generating what's possibly an extra 2 CPU and a
Yeah.
couple of gigs of RAM, right? It's basically an entire VM's worth of load, depending on the size of your VMs,
Yeah.
which is not needed because it can easily be handled by the other pods.
Yeah.
So
That's true.
and that's just thinking in the cloud native sense. If we go to the omnibus side, like I know of 1,000 user systems that are just really big VMs.
Yeah.
And we don't spawn action cable for this and Rails for this and Rails for this, right? We don't have the Rails application segregated into individual API routes. We just don't. It's not that it's not impossible. It's not something we can look into. It's that it's not reasonable for smaller instances. And we have to think about not only us at millions and millions of users, but at the people with 15 users.
Yeah. The only other thing I'd be cautious of there, like I accept that I don't know if Action Cable will even have those hooks into forcibly disconnecting those clients, like in that way you suggest. But open up an issue about it, and see where it gets to. But it's quite possible that we'll just have to just shut down without them. But that will be problematic for people that have got everything going into the same service.
What what do we do in the meantime? I mean, we need to investigate this, but what do we do in the meantime about our SLIs for error rates on the WebSocket surface? Like
So
we have silences set across the board for load balancer error rates.
in my opinion, in our infrastructure in Kubernetes with the segregated setup, I would actually just set blackout seconds to 0 and just thunk. Just literally.
Okay, that's fine, but that doesn't. But we're still going to see errors when. See, the issue is that we see these errors, but we just get reconnects and everything, as far as we understand, is hunky dory on the client side.
Okay, so the simple direct route is take staging or pre and set just this deployment to have a blackout seconds to 1 and hammer it with active connections and see what actually occurs.
Yeah.
My bet is that it's going to terminate so fast that we're not going to get extra connections, new connections coming through. If you set the blackout seconds to like 5, it's not going to even the response time in all the stack components that lead the traffic to get there, because yay platforms.
True.
It's going to get to the point where it'll just get terminated so fast that we might see a blip on 1 request, maybe 2, not several while something just sits around.
Mm-hmm.
Job, sorry, I was concentrating on several things when you were talking earlier, but like this over here, is my screen sharing now?
Yeah, yours is working. Yeah, I'm jealous.
Yeah. It won't last for long. So like this over here isn't related to, this is WebSockets, right? This over here, this load balancer spike, doesn't seem to be related to deployment, is it? At 1400 UTC?
I'd have to look, we'd have to look at the deployer.
Because I thought a lot of them were that other problem with the client header that was being sent through by like 1 IP address, where he was sending a lot. Are you aware of that incident?
Yeah. But well, I think Ben stripped that header at HA Proxy. So we're not seeing that problem anymore. We can look at Sentry to see if these are 500 errors, but if you look at it, the workhorse error rate is much lower, right? So it doesn't look like, it looks like this is like the load balancer complaining, not actual errors.
Yeah, and that's what I'm like. I suppose if you've also seen them during a deployment though, and that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I think we have some work to do still, and I don't think it's causing that big of a problem, or at least as far as we know, this isn't causing any pain for users. But I don't want to stay in this situation for too long. I think like by the end of next week, we should shoot to having these silences removed.
Just while I'm here, before I go away, this is why I like to have WebSockets separated from the web. This is a classic example, and it's just right in front of us. This is why I like to have WebSockets separated, right? So here's our base load at like 20 requests per second, and then for some reason it's just spiking up, and we're hardly even using this stuff yet. So wait until we're really using this, and this is spiking 5 times the load. This is why it's very good to keep this segregated, because it's very DDoSy.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy we decided to create a new service for this, and also to have its own node pool. I don't know, I see a deployment that happened about 10, 20 minutes ago. So maybe the spike is due to that. I'll dig into it a bit more.
Logistically, that spike makes sense because there's a bunch of connections that all of a sudden have to be reformed. So the
exactly.
20 or 30 are new connections coming in. The mash of 500 is a bunch of people who were already connected going, hey.
No, but they don't get, Jason, they don't get 500s though, because the WebSocket, it connects, it does the upgrade, and that's the moment that you get a 200 back. When that gets disconnected, it's not a status 500. It's just a socket disconnected. The status code is 200 on those. So that's just something that's worth being clear about and clarifying. When you get disconnected without expectation on a WebSocket, it's still just it's not treated as an error by HAProxy or by Nginx or anything else. It's a 200. Because the 200 happened right at the beginning of the request.
Right, and I'm not speaking about the specific error codes. I'm talking about the request per second.
Yeah, the retry. Yeah.
Is because you had a connection and then there's a whole bunch of new ones.
Yeah.
And if it comes down to the fact of there's 20 requests per second and there's a lot of active connections still being held open, and then you smash it with 1,000 out of nowhere.
Yeah.
What do we know about scaling? You're handling a low number, just a whole lot of consistent, and then all of a sudden rush
with
hour
Gita,
is
what
a
we did
thing
was,
for a reason.
we did exponential backoff on those, or randomized retry, just to kind of spread it a little bit. But I'm sure action cables are a pretty widely used thing. I would be surprised if it didn't have some of those things in it.
So we do still need to figure out where the actual surge of the errors are specifically coming from, but we know the exact time window is most likely new connections inbound after a rollover. The question is then,
in order to get a 500, they have to be new.
Fives?
Yeah.
I think, Jason, I think I like your suggestion the most, which is to reduce this grace period. It feels like it's a safe thing to do for WebSockets anyway, and we can try decreasing it, see if that helps with the error spike.
Just one more thing on that thought. I saw that Heinrich or somebody mentioned that you can send commands through the WebSockets. That's something an action cable can do, and I think they're not doing it yet, and I think it's a very bad idea to do that. And one of the reasons would be, if somebody sends a command and they're busy creating a merge request and they've issued that through the WebSocket, first of all, we don't get any logs. Our metrics don't work anymore. But then the third reason is if we can no longer do the short terminate, because you don't know if that request is still ongoing. So if you speak to any of those application developers, I think we should push back very heavily on them. WebSockets should be for things coming out, not for things going back. If they want to send something back to the server, they should always issue an HTTP request for that.
Okay.
I'd agree with that. And that's the danger. WebSockets are really cool from a technical standpoint, but if they're used in the wrong way, you lack visibility, you interrupt controls, and the design has to be done right. And I can tell you doing that right is not easy, having done WebSockets in the past myself. It's
TCP on top of HTTP.
right. So you've got TCP and HTTP and then TCP again.
And then TCP on top. But also any reason that they say, oh, it'll be faster or anything like that, that's totally now no longer true because of streaming like HTTP2 and HTTP3 anyway. So, you know, you're no longer setting up a connection for every request or anything like that. So if they say, oh, but it'll be so much faster, you can say, well, it's so much faster with HTTP2 or 3 anyway. Like that's no longer a valid reason to use a WebSocket.
Okay, well, I think that's pretty much all I have for this.
Cool. Okay, great. So just the only other bit I wanted to run through, just especially whilst we have you here, Jason, is just a quick look at our blockers. Hopefully you can see the blockers. So I saw, Jason, you got pinged on this, removing the duplicate messages. Do you know what might be involved or like when that might likely, the charts change that Scarbeck mentioned, when we might likely be able to get something like that?
I don't know about this charts change, and I'll be honest, I haven't had a chance to go look at this before just a few minutes ago. My days for the last 2 have been very busy with interviews, so I had a lot of spare time. I can answer that question in about an hour, but
Okay,
I can't
perfect.
answer it right now.
Okay, fantastic. That's great. Then the only other blocker we have outstanding is the one you're working on, Scarbeck.
Right, and I have my team doing reviews of these things, and they're all pretty much identical. So it's check the last one, confirm everything behaves as expected, and move along. It's just that it's in the large volume that we have, so we're working to get through them as fast as possible.
Cool. Sounds good. Great. Was there anything else anyone wanted to go over today?
Have you seen the regional dashboards? Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to say thank you to Jason for joining. Really appreciate it. It was very nice to have you here. Yeah, the regional dashboards are really nice.
It just give us Git and registry broken down by the 3 Kubernetes clusters.
Yeah, and something I mentioned to Andrew and might be interesting for Scarbeck as well is that when we start moving the API, we can overload this region label to compare the VM SLIs versus the Kubernetes SLI, because for VMs, we set the region label to US East. It's just like set the same everywhere. For the Kubernetes, we have it set to US East 1, B, C, and D. So given that we have this dimension in our SLIs, if we split traffic 50-50 between the VMs and Kubernetes, we can actually do a direct comparison, which would be nice.
So you can already see it on some of the things, like this one here. But certainly here, like exactly what you said, because this SLI comes from the HA proxy, which is on VMs. And so it's US East. And then the 3 other ones are US East 1, A, B, or what's it? BCD.
BCD.
The one thing that's really weird, at least I was looking at this and it didn't seem right. I don't know if is the 3 are identical, Jarv. Like really, like there's tiny differences, but like I was expecting more variety between the 3 clusters, but they have the same dips and the same spikes. It's very suspicious to me.
That does seem suspicious.
Yeah, I mean, there are differences. They're not identical, but they are very, very similar.
Well, that's possibly because we're doing very good at spreading the load.
Well,
yeah,
it's good news if it's true.
Don't get me wrong,
I mean,
verify.
For what it's worth, deploys are done simultaneously on the 3 clusters. So if it's deploy related, it'd be the same.
Yeah.
I don't know. Could be downstream dependencies that are causing the slowness, right? And then
Yeah.
it just is the same on everything.
Are you going to change it so that the deploys are staggered?
Yes.
Yeah, eventually.
Okay.
That's the plan.
Yeah,
Cool.
it makes sense, right? Like it means the overall time is longer, but it's safer, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you read GitHub's latest blog post on how they do deploys, but this is sort of like where I think we're going to eventually go, where they said like they started out with the canary stage at 2% and they realized, okay, that isn't enough. They needed like 10%. And I think for us, it's going to be 33%, where we'll have one cluster go first, and then we can measure, using the region label, we can kind of see what the SLIs are for that cluster and then move forward. And that'll be great.
So we can lose 33% of our users' tokens when we roll things out in one go.
Yeah, Mr. Cynical Sally over there.
Thank you. Thank you. It has been a long day. It has been a long day.
Yeah, that's true, Merritt. But we'll be able to move forward so much quicker. We'll just say, forget it. We'll just move forward and everything will be fine.
Yeah,
That's a
just
good
move
point.
faster and break stuff. I mean, nobody ever
Exactly.
notices.
Luckily, it's turning out that specific issue is turning out to be not that big of a deal. So
Well, that's good.
if nothing else, but yeah, joking a bit. Where is that article? Did you share that article somewhere? I didn't.
I posted it in delivery
I'll check it
channel,
out.
but I was yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else anyone wants to go over? No? Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for sharing and joining today, and we'll see you next time.